Ashley. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Downtown Omemee Reconstruction Public Information Center number 2. My name is Corby Purdy, and I'm the Manager of Infrastructure Design and Construction for the City of Kawartha Lakes. First, I'd like to introduce some staff that are on the call. Juan Rojas, who is the Director of Engineering and Corporate Assets, and Ashley Locke, who is our City Communications Specialist. Next, I'd also like to recognize members of council that have zoomed in tonight. Councillor Ashmore, I see, is with us, and I believe that we are expecting Deputy Mayor Richardson. And before I introduce and turn it over to the consulting team, I'd like to give a high-level timeline of how we got to this point. So in 2017, city staff completed a streetscape design and facade guideline for downtown Omemee. Council approved a budget for downtown improvements, and engineering staff retained Ainley Group to complete the preliminary and detailed design in 2019. Public meeting number 1 was held at the Omemee Legion on September 23rd, 2020. And tonight is public meeting number 2. So at this time, I'll hand it over to Alex of Ainley Group to introduce his staff and lead tonight's presentation.
Thanks, Corby.
No problem.
So as Corby was saying, my name is Alex Wilkinson. I'm project manager with Ainley Group. Just to introduce some of the Ainley Group members that are with us tonight, we have Brian Paquin, who's a project director on this project. Scott Reynolds, he's a senior environmental planner. And we're also joined by Kim Musacco from Basterfield and Associates. She and her team at Basterfield are the landscaping architect sub-consultant group. So with everybody introduced, I think I'm just going to begin the presentation now. So like Corby said, we're conducting the second PIC for the project tonight. The first portion will consist of a presentation that details the plan works, followed by a brief question and answer period for the attendees. Before jumping into the details, it's important to note that this project is being completed under a municipal class environmental assessment process. The EA process is a planning tool used to identify the possible adverse effects of proposed infrastructure on the environment based on the nature of the project. The works that are being proposed as part of the Omemee Downtown Reconstruction Project are classified as a Schedule A+ project. And Schedule A+ projects are usually associated with minimal environmental impacts and are pre-approved. On this slide, I'm showing the general extent of the project area along King Street. On the west limit, we have James Street North. On the east limit, it's the bridge deck at Pigeon River. And throughout the project area, there's intersections at Sturgeon Road North and South, George Street North and South, Colburn Street, and Mary Street West. At the bottom of the screen here, in 2012, the City of Kawartha Lakes completed the Growth Management Strategy and Municipal Master Plan project. The purpose of this study was to develop a strategy to plan for and manage growth in a sustainable manner that addresses economic, social, and environmental considerations. One of the volumes in the study was the Transportation Master Plan, which included recommendations for improvements at the intersection of King Street and Sturgeon Road North and South. These improvements primarily consisted of a widening of King Street to allow for an additional dedicated left-hand turn lane for eastbound traffic. So there's the proposed scope of work can be broken down into 2 components generally. Road reconstruction, the benefits of the road reconstruction overall are going to be an improved underground infrastructure, mostly dealing with storm sewer, vehicular traffic flow, and improvement of queuing at the intersection of King Street and Sturgeon Road. The road reconstruction itself is about 500 meters in length, and it's going to consist of new concrete curb and gutter. The predominant servicing throughout this corridor is storm sewer. The sanitary and water main, from our understanding, are mostly connected at the rear of the properties. And so when we go to do the road reconstruction, we're going to be removing the existing storm sewer and installing new storm sewer that is up to the city standards and provides an improved capacity. In general, there's 2 storm sewer systems throughout this project area. George Street ends up being the drainage divide generally between the 2, with the portion on the east side of George Street ultimately draining down and discharging into the Pigeon River. Now, as I've noted here, there's going to be some consideration of an alternative outlet location, and I'll get into that a couple slides later. Something that I've already mentioned was the dedicated left turn lane for eastbound traffic on King Street, turning left on the Sturgeon Road North. As an ancillary work, there's going to involve some utility relocation, mostly hydro at this point. There's 2 hydro poles that are located, one on either side of Sturgeon Road South. So to facilitate that widening at the intersection, it's going to require relocation of both those poles. Moving on to the streetscape improvement portion, the idea is to increase pedestrian traffic flow, safety, and also build upon the aesthetics of the downtown corridor. This is mostly achieved through a widening of the sidewalk areas to provide a furnishing zone, which will accommodate street furniture like benches, lamps, plantings, as well as increasing the pedestrian zone, which is the main walking portion of the sidewalk. As Corby mentioned earlier, the foundation for the streetscape improvements mostly comes from the 2017 streetscape and facade guidelines. And from those guidelines, that is actually what kind of forms the basis for what was presented at the first PIC, which I'll be showing over the next 2 slides. So on this slide here, we're focusing on the the westerly portion of the project area. Some of the improvements that were envisioned were plantings, including trees, seasonal planters, a variety of lights, some just focusing on the pedestrian side and some focusing on both the street side and pedestrian side. In addition, there's going to be improved pedestrian paving throughout the corridor to improve upon the aesthetics. And you'll notice here that there's these dashed lines here, which represent curb extensions, which are just frequently called bump outs. So in these areas, the idea was that the sidewalk and curb could be extended out into the roadway, which would increase the area available for the pedestrian zone and the furnishing zone. The curb bump outs were actually a focus of the first PIC, and the public was encouraged to comment on them specifically. Again, you can see the bump outs or the curb bump outs here. What you'll also notice that the limits of these projects are the gateway features represented here by the G. When we were considering the curb extensions, one of the benefits would have been that a more elaborate gateway feature could have been installed. I think at the time we envisioned a stand of 3 banner poles that would incorporate ornamental banners and lighting. So having presented that at PIC number 1, here's the feedback that we received. So overall, what we heard at the first PIC was that there was support for the streetscape and facade guidelines and its features, especially for the plantings of greeneries and trees. And the public was interested in trying to maximize this aspect to the extent possible. However, the support for the curb extensions was very limited. And also there was some interest in looking into the pedestrian crosswalks, which would involve traffic signalization and calming measures as well to achieve that. As always, one of the main concerns was the timing of the construction and how access to the businesses would be maintained. So in the following slides, I'll give you an idea of what we're now proposing and how all this public consultation has been incorporated into the revised streetscape plan for the project. First off, you'll notice that the left-hand turn lane has been added at the King Street intersection with Sturgeon Road. This additional lane should reduce the impact of eastbound traffic wishing to go straight through or turn right by those wanting to turn left and go north. You'll also notice the lack of curb extensions, which is in line with the limited support that we received previously. I will bring it up again the next slide. There is one location that we wish to maintain the curb bump outs, and that is to accommodate a gateway feature there, and it's not expected to impact any existing parking there or any traffic maneuvering. Some of the features that were previously envisioned behind the sidewalk, we've since confirm the municipal right-of-way limits, and we've determined that they're beyond the municipal lands and actually on private property. So they've been omitted or moved into the right-of-way. As I'll show, well, as you'll see in a typical section a few slides later, or maybe you can notice right here, is that the sidewalk has been increased in width to provide that 1 meter wide furnishing zone. Should take a second here just to note that what you're looking at is the 1 meter wide furnishing zone that consists of unit pavers, and located behind them is a more typical concrete sidewalk for the pedestrian zone. So since the streetscape guidelines were completed, the exact widths of the pedestrian areas have been determined, and it's going to factor into the placement of some of these furnishings, because priority is going to be given to having a clear pedestrian zone rather than having a number of furnishings, sorry. The one curb bumper that's being maintained, you can see here on the right side of your screen. Like I said before, the whole idea is to provide some space for the gateway feature that was envisioned here. There will be some work to optimize the radius here so it doesn't impact access to the driveway. And this is still the taper zone from the bridge, so it's not necessarily taking away from any existing parking spaces. Another thing you might notice is at this time, we're not proposing any additional pedestrian crossings of King Street in the corridor. At this time, we felt there wasn't a warrant for it, given the existing traffic, or sorry, the existing volume of pedestrian traffic. However, as part of this project, we're installing electrical conduit throughout the corridor. So if later, if it was desired to install an additional crossing, there would be a power supply there to accommodate the signalization. If we were to go that route, additional analysis would be required to confirm the impact to traffic along King Street. Switching over to the storm sewer on the right side of the screen here, we're getting over towards the Pigeon River area. So under existing conditions, the outlet is located on the south side of King Street, and tentatively it's proposed to be maintained. However, we're currently pursuing an alternative storm sewer outlet location on the north side of King Street. That's the boat launch area. The idea being that if we move to the north side, we have more room to install an improved outlet, which will have an increased capacity over maintaining the existing one on the south side. As well, it'll give us some space to provide a more robust erosion protection works. Right now, as we are looking into it, it appears that it might have minimal impacts to the south side of the boat launch parking area from a grading perspective, but overall, we don't foresee that it's going to be severely impacting the use of that property. As part of the storm sewer, I should note that as part of the storm sewer design process, approvals from Kawartha Conservation as well as Parks Canada, as it relates to the Trent Severn Waterway, are being sought. So on this slide, we've got some graphics, mostly from the 2017 Streetscape guidelines, just to help you to visualize what it is we're planning on in the downtown area. Now, on the bottom right, you can see a more broad view of the improvements. Something to note is that on the sidewalks, they show unit pavers for the full width of the sidewalk. As I mentioned a couple slides earlier, we're just looking to do 1 meter wide furnishing zone and maintaining the concrete behind it. So from there to the building face. The street lighting that we have in mind is more towards a city standard, something similar to what we've seen in Fenland Falls. Some of the furnishings that you could expect within the furnishing zone. Here's some examples shown here in the bottom left. For a more pedestrian oriented view, we can look in the top left, just reminding you that the unit pavers won't extend the full width from back of curb to building face. Now, some of the writing here may appear small around this image here. However, it's my understanding that these slides will be posted for review. So If you'd like to go back and look at them in more detail, feel free. Now moving on to what the typical section of King Street might look like in terms of dimensions. You'll see that 1 meter furnishing zone that I described. It will accommodate plantings, street lighting, and the other street furniture that was shown on the previous slide. Now behind it, between the furnishing zone to the building face, we'll have the pedestrian zone. Overall, you might notice that there's an increased width from the building face to the back of curb. This has been the result of a slight reduction in the asphalt to accommodate these widenings. However, we're still providing a generous 3.5 meter wide through lane each direction, as well as a more typical 2.5 meter wide parking stall. That's what I'd like to mention is the roadside parking spaces. So as you can see, you might have noticed in the last couple slides, the existing number of parking spaces isn't expected to be reduced by anything such as the curb extensions. The only places that we're seeing the curb extensions are in a taper zone, which don't currently provide parking. As we work our way through the detailed phase, which we're in now, we'll be incorporating some of the comments we get from this PIC tonight, and we hope to conclude that in February 2020. Now, once the design's completed, we'll be looking at the construction timeline that currently is dependent on construction approval from the MTO through their Connecting Links program. The funding decision is anticipated March 2022, and if it is received, this project will be tendered shortly thereafter for start sometime this spring and concluding this fall. If you recall, in a previous slide, I talked about how one of the main feedbacks was some of the aspects that should be kept in mind during construction, primarily being maintaining access to businesses, downtown businesses throughout the process. The contractor will be required to do so. Along with that, the contractor will maintain as many parking spaces as possible. We're still working to optimize the traffic management plan for the temporary conditions during construction. At this time, we foresee it involving the closure of one lane along King Street. Another thing to note is that a precondition survey will be completed before construction begins, which will include an inventory of the buildings through pictures and measurements. The idea being that if that the conditions of these buildings can be monitored throughout the construction process to ensure that there's no negative impacts to them during the installation. So generally, this concludes the presentation portion of the Public Information Center. As a recap, from here, we're going to be receiving and reviewing any comments from the attendees tonight or received online, incorporating those into the final design and working on some of the final touches. If you recall, the storm sewer and the placement of street furniture, and pending construction funding approval, we'll be tendering the project for construction. So before I turn it back to Ms. Locke from the city for the Q&A portion, I just want to encourage everybody to get their comments in by Thursday, February 17th, which is 3 weeks from now. The preferred method is to go to jumpinkawarthalakes.ca, and there's a comment form there that you can fill out and submit. Barring that, if you need to, you can also always email Corby or myself at the contact information shown below. Thank you.
I'll jump in here now, Alex. This is a good opportunity. If anybody has any questions, I believe there's a raise hand feature, and Ashley will monitor the raise hands and unmute you to ask questions.
Not seeing any here yet, Corby, but if anyone does have any questions, if you're on your phone, it is *9 or if you are on your Zoom screen, you can simply go underneath the reactions button and click raise a hand to ask a question. And we see we've got one here from Jill, so please feel free to ask away.
Hi, I'm just wondering if there is any plans. It wasn't included in what's been discussed tonight, but I was wondering if there were any plans to install a light at the corner of King and Ski Hill Road. It's almost inaccessible if you're coming north on Ski Hill and come up to King to make a left turn or even a right turn, especially through rush hours or the weekends.
I can take that one, Alex. As part of this project, it is outside of the scope of the project limits. That's not to say that it can't be included in future works, but it is not going to be part of this project that is for the downtown area.
Okay, thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. I see Shannon also has her hand raised. So Shannon, if you'd like to ask your question, please feel free.
Hi there. Hi, Corby. Hi, everyone. I'm just curious. I did put it in the chats. The set of lights at King and Sturgeon, people run those lights all the time. They seem to accelerate getting into that intersection. And with the downtown core being done, I wanted to know, can we somehow have red light cameras put up at that intersection to slow people going down, especially during the construction time?
Can I flip that one to you, Alex, for something that can be done during construction?
At this time, Shannon, I think what I can say is that I've noted your comment, and I get your concern, and I think that's something that we can look at when it comes to the tender documents when we go to construction. But I think that's not a bad idea. I just think it might take me sitting down, our whole team sitting down together and figuring out how to best address that.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon.
Can I just add to that too, is part of the design project, we're going to look extensively at traffic management during construction. We realize it's very busy on this corridor. So we're going to try to implement a lot of traffic control in the tender itself. So we're going to be taking a closer look at that as we approach the final steps of the project.
Corby, if I could jump in, also on a permanent solution, the city is investigating photo radar and red light cameras. There was a report brought to council last year regarding that. We've recently launched our 40 is the new 50 speed reduction campaign, which started late last year. We do have a council resolution to evaluate that and then take recommendations on photo radar and also, red light cameras. Again, that's the more permanent solution, but we're focusing, citywide, so City Kawartha Lakes wide, not just in Omemee. So that can be reviewed in the future.
Thank you, Juan. Now I see we've got Councillor Ashmore. So if you would like to proceed with your question.
Thank you, Ashley. Just a question to Alex there. Thanks for the presentation. The first question is, are the sidewalks, you mentioned that they're going to be increased. I know we have parallel parking as opposed to angle parking on Kent Street and Lindsay. When Kent Street was redeveloped, they increased the side, they widened the sidewalk, and what you experience now is a kind of a tight fit when you're going by vehicles, especially a large truck, a 3/4 ton truck, for example. You're very close to them. But because in Omemee here, we have parallel parking. First of all, how much wider will the sidewalks be, and will they? You had said that there's 2.5 meters of parking space on each side, so there won't be any parking spaces that'll be taken away. Is that correct?
No, this should be generally maintained. So in talking about the wide, I think what I mentioned was there was a slight reduction in the asphalt. So I think the total asphalt width, it drops down, and just equating it to either side, I think you might gain close to 2 feet for each sidewalk total. So the current lanes that go through Omemee are very wide. If anybody driving through there, I'm sure you can see that based on the lines for the parking area or the parking lane, it's quite wide, and the road itself is just wide. So right now, this 3.5 meter wide, I see your concern about, especially it being number 7, trying to get out of your car with the busy traffic next to you. The 3.5 meter wide lane is at the upper end of what the TAC manual, the Transportation Association of Canada's guidelines recommend, without starting to become too excessive. So we are still providing a nice wide through lane there. And for the parking side of things, I believe that we're still slightly wider than what the municipal zoning bylaw indicates as it being the minimum parking stall width. So while there is a reduction in the asphalt, just to gain a little bit of the pedestrian area, I don't foresee it. That's a good concern. I just don't foresee it being that severe.
Oh, okay, thanks. And the last question was at the corner of King Street and Sturgeon Street. For example, if you're coming north, if you're on Sturgeon Street South and you're trying to turn onto Sturgeon Street North, there's a bit of a curve you have to make. Will that be improved, that curve? Because it's always a kind of a tight turn. You have to go on an advanced green. But will that be reconfigured slightly so it's easier to go from Sturgeon Street South to Sturgeon Street North when you're crossing King Street?
I think when the current configurations at this time are looking like it's going to be maintained. We are kind of limited in the flexibility that we have at this intersection because Sturgeon Road South and a lot of these other side streets, they have a more narrow right of way. We're already behind the 8 ball kind of just by having this offset intersection. And so in lieu of that, we've tried to make some improvements like that might improve what we have for this. We're trying to make the most of the space we have. Something I didn't notice or didn't mention in my presentation is that probably went unnoticed, but this north stop bar here has been moved back. So having to accommodate this offset in the intersection, one of the ideas is that in moving that back, larger vehicles turning from King Street onto Sturgeon Road, they have more space to maneuver that. So as for the improvements for traffic heading from Sturgeon Road South to north, at this time it's looking like the vehicle's path will be maintained. And like I said, we're just limited in the design flexibility by the property that we have there.
Okay, that's fine, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. All right, up next, we've got a question from Carly. Carly, are you there?
No question here.
Oh, sorry, you had your hand up there. I apologize.
That's okay.
Next we've got up is Dan. Dan, would you like to ask a question?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ashley, and thanks for the presentation, Alex. I guess one of the topics that came up was access to businesses during the construction period. I guess the access to business, kind of wondering the definition of that. I mean, obviously, people will be able to access entrances and exits of those businesses. As a lot of us know, the parking is very limited in downtown Omemee already. So during construction, is there going to be any parking to allow those businesses to function? How is that managed?
All right, thanks for the question, Dan. You're right. When we talk about access to business, it mostly involves the pedestrian access to the business, just based on the nature of this project. We have infrastructure going close to the curb line, so it's important in that way that even though we get circuiting close to the building, we're still maintaining access to it. But it sounds like your bigger concern is just parking in that sense, and that's something that we're currently working on in our detailed stage. We've been in recurring discussions to try to figure out where might be an appropriate place for parking that isn't too far away. From my understanding, there's a couple of small spaces that have been identified just one block north or south. And another alternative that we're currently considering is the idea of staging our construction in such a way that it might be able to maintain parking stalls in some areas while we're working on, say, the other half of the road or down the road. Which is so all that to say is that that's something that we have to figure out as part of the detailed design phase. And it's something that we know is very important to everybody in the area.
Are you able to discuss the alternate parking locations?
I think it might be premature at this time to get into it. That might be outside the scope of the presentation just yet. But from my understanding, as soon as it becomes available, it'll be provided.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. Up next, we've got Julie. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes. So my question is, or sorry, might be concern. So I was concerned about the bump outs just because how busy Omemee is and the amount of traffic that goes through it. And thanks for getting rid of it. But now that we're losing 2 feet, I know currently with agricultural equipment going down the highway, it is already a struggle if there was cars parked on both sides and you meet oncoming traffic with equipment. So now we're losing 2 more feet. That would be a struggle, and equipment's not going to get smaller.
Okay. So this was something that we had thought of. Now, I think somebody had commented previously about combines. So that, I mean, that's a larger piece of equipment, but I think the width that was thrown around was 17 feet. And when we looked at the drawings, we found that 17 feet couldn't be accommodated if there was oncoming traffic and parked cars at the same time anyways. Depending on the size of the equipment that's coming through, especially in the downtown area, it might have been oversized at the initial existing conditions. So Corby, I'm not sure if you have anything more to add on that.
I guess maybe the concern is it's not going to get easier with the 2 feet. I know currently for my family, they have to swerve. So they have to maybe time it so they can get to the other side, but then that's not safe.
Yeah, I guess maybe the only thing that I have to add, Alex, is the design is meeting all the provincial and municipal guidelines. We do recognize that there are some larger vehicles out there, and it's not getting easier, but at the same time, we are meeting the design guidelines.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Julie.
Next up, we've got Jill. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, I'm taking her place for 2 minutes. Just a question regarding, are you cutting down the highway to 1 lane? Is that going to be run by lights, or is it going to be 1 way and you're going to run the traffic through another street?
Well, at this time, I think what we're looking at is having it controlled, like you said, either by flaggers or by automated lights. That's something that will also be discussed with the contractor that's awarded the project. But from my understanding, like I said, we're still in the early stages of trying to figure out what exactly it is that we want to do here. The idea is that we'll try to keep the traffic on King Street as much as possible so as to not impact the neighboring properties on Mary Street or to the north.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I do have a question here in the chat from Veronica. It states the Omemee Lions have 3 season banners that are to be erected on the new light standards. When can the Lions expect these banners to go up?
I think this kind of plays into our construction timeline. So like I said, it's all tentative based on when the construction funding is approved, if it is by the MTO this year. So with that in mind, we foresee there being construction completion by this fall. So I guess in saying that it's a 3 season banner, then fall is going to lead in the winter. So if I had to guess here, the best I could, I guess I would say next spring, tentative with funding.
Thank you, Alex. I do have another question here from Shannon. So Shannon, if you'd like to go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks again. Sorry, I wanted to ask, I see that it's ending at James Street. That is a sidewalk crossing for Lady Eaton Public School. Are they doing anything to highlight that school crossing as well? I know it's at the beginning of it, but just something to really bring attention to that area. Because right now, I mean, I'm sure you've all heard there are people that run that all the time. Kids are trying, it's just not properly cleared sometimes as it is. So I'm just wondering, is there a way to highlight that area for the students?
Well, I would encourage you to submit that comment because it might be something just like you said, it's just on the project limit of this. Possibly it's something to be considered. Now, Corby, I'm not sure if you have more information. I'm not sure what exactly is envisioned to the west of this of our project limit right now. I will say it's just out of the extent of our project area, and based on what we're doing here at King Street, we don't foreseeing it worsening the situation at James Street North, but definitely can see how you're identifying an opportunity to possibly improve upon what's already there.
Yeah, I'll just jump in then, Alex. Very good comment, Shannon. I think there's always the ability to improve a situation if we can. And as Alex kind of hinted upon, the grant funding really is it has 2 components to it. One is the downtown reconstruction, but the other component is to resurface within the village limits of King Street. So it's from the village limits on the east and the west, which will probably be done by a paving contractor if we get the grant funding. I'm not sure what's really envisioned there, whether it's pavement marking or additional signage, but it's something that the team can definitely look into. Because I think you're right. I think the pedestrian crossing and especially the school kids crossing, safety is paramount.
Excellent. Thank you, Shannon. Now I am seeing another hand from Carly, so I just want to double check if she had any comments or any feedback for the team.
No, sorry. I may be pressing it by accident, but no. Here, thanks, guys.
Not a problem. Thank you,
Thanks,
Carly. All right, that is all I am seeing for questions here. So last chance if anybody has any feedback or questions for the team for this session. All right, Veronica's asked the chat, how likely is the MTO going to approve this project since this project has been going on for years?
So
I'm wondering if maybe Director Rojas would comment on the funding application.
Sure, absolutely, Corby. So we've applied for it's Connecting Link grant through MTO. We've applied a couple times over the last couple of years. Actually, we were successful, I think, in 2012, and that was for the main bridge on Highway 7. When we rehabbed that bridge, we were awarded a connecting link fund, and I believe that project was 2012, 2013 timeframe. We applied a couple times for the downtown reconstruction. We were successful in getting a partial grant or a grant for design only. And that's why we started the design. I can't say for certainty we're going to get it, but we were denied last year. There is another intake this year. My staff, outside of Corby's group, have discussed it with the province. We very positive preliminary discussions. We also have a letter of support from Laurie Scott, which is our MPP. So that's all good. So the city has done as much as possible to increase our chances of getting the connecting link grant for this next intake. We should know by the middle of March of this year. Again, nothing's guaranteed, but the city has basically done everything in its powers to put the city of Kawartha Lakes in a very strong and good position for successful grant application.
Okay, thank you, Juan. Is there a gentleman by the name of Peter who's got a question for the team on the line here? I'm not seeing.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, there we can. Thank you, Peter.
Hi, yeah, I have a question about brick versus the concrete on the sidewalks. The reducing it really does have an impact on the design and look and feel of that Main Street corridor. And I'm wondering, is that just a dollars and cents thing? Because the brick, as I've seen it in other markets, is pretty effective. Is there a reason why we've reduced it?
Well, from my understanding of the previous streetscape and facade guidelines, I believe that it was always envisioned as a strip. Another thing, there's other aspects to it too to remember. Now, if being in a furnishing zone, there's going to be street furniture, plantings, lightings there. So snow removal is already kind of tricky, but through the pedestrian area, I know sometimes there's concerns with plows and how they handle unit pavers. So there's definitely maintenance benefits in that sense. And yes, if you would like to see a full width of unit pavers, I would encourage you to submit a comment so it can be recorded in the project file.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. And also just to add to that, Alex, it's similar to downtown Fenland. We completed downtown Fenland last year, where there is a concrete sidewalk, and then adjacent to the concrete sidewalk, there is a decorative interlocking brick strip. It does beautify the downtown in accordance with our streetscape guidelines. And as Alex mentioned, it provides a corridor for, bike racks, benches, decorative lights, all the furnishing. So it does look quite nice once it's done.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Juan.
So sorry, Ashley, I did notice another question in the chat regarding the grant.
Yes.
And I believe Councillor Ashmore did answer that. So the total project cost, which includes the reconstruction of the downtown, which you've seen here, plus what Corby mentioned was resurfacing of the roads outside the downtown on Highway 7 within the village limits. Now, that total project cost is around $4 million, of which, if we're successful with the Connecting Link grant, the province will pay $3 million of the $4 million. So it's really great news if we get it. We're essentially constructing a $4 million project for $1 million. But again, we won't know until the middle of March.
Thank you for clarifying that one. Okay, again, I'm not seeing any hands, so I'm going to give a last call. I'm also going to be putting into the chat the direct link to the project page. It would have been where everybody went to register. There is now a feedback form on that page that has the ability for you to submit any comments or additional feedback to the team. And as Alex mentioned, we are receiving comments until Thursday, February 17th. So please head on over there. If you want to submit them tonight while it's still fresh in your mind, feel free. Otherwise, this meeting will be posted online on the project page for you to rewatch back or share with others that may not have been able to make the meeting. But I would like to thank everybody for their time tonight, and I will lead it back to Alex to close.
Thank you, Ashley. So just to recap what Ashley said, I would, if you have any comments, any questions, even if they were ones that were asked tonight, I would encourage you to submit them through the city's website that Ashley linked in the chat, jumpingkawarthas.ca, kawarthalake.ca. As you said, we have until February 17th to do so, and your public consultation matters. It's, as you might have seen from PIC to PIC number 1 to PIC number 2, as shown in the slides, they do influence how the project goes ahead. So if you want to be involved with improvements to your committee, or sorry, your community, I encourage you to go and submit your comments. Otherwise, thank you for attending and have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.